The goal of this workshop is to help you build tension by revising and improving your rising action. Here's the key idea. Every single event that happens in your story should build the central conflict, and the central conflict should build step by step by step carefully toward a climax. Remember that an anecdote is a very short story about a single interesting event. That means that it's focused on a short period of time. It has a limited setting, it doesn't take place in a lot of different places, and it deals with one single conflict and its resolution. And you should know that plot chart pretty well by this point. One conflict that I saw in several people's drafts was that their anecdote includes too many conflicts. Here's one example that I pulled from one of my students. So this student, for his second part of his autobiography, began here. His soldier arrives at training, it's physically difficult, the soldiers are suffering. Then, there's a commanding officer who yells at him. The soldier is tempted to quit, but he remembers his family and money pressures, and that keeps him in the army. Then he meets a new guy at the camp, and he relates to him, but realizes he doesn't want to get too close to this new guy because our soldier has had so many friends die, and this guy has a family too. 4 weeks pass, the training gets easier, our soldier is getting closer to the new friend and misses his old friends, and he's starting to better understand why the training officer was so strict at the beginning. As our story draws to a close, our soldier is getting close to returning to the front. He writes a letter home, and as he writes the letter, he worries about what he will tell his friend's mother if this friend dies at their next tour of duty. Finally, our soldier leaves for his next round at the front. Okay, you might have noticed that there's good conflict in this story, and there is. There's actually too much good conflict. So one conflict we see is man versus self. At the beginning of the story, we hear the conflict of, can I find the strength to make it through training? As the story goes on, we see a man versus man conflict. How should our soldier react to a seemingly cruel officer? Later in the story, we see another man versus self conflict, as he wonders, should he open himself up to the potential pain of making and then losing friends, given that anyone can die at any time in war? And then we close with another man versus self conflict. Should our soldier tell the truth or lie to protect the feelings of another, in this case, the mother of his friend? This is too many conflicts for one single anecdote, and so our writer needs to focus in on just one. As I thought through his conflicts, I thought they were all okay. This one seemed just for the beginning. This one seemed just kind of for the beginning and pretty limited. This one seemed to connect really throughout the whole story about my character's connection to his new friend, to his old friend, to his old friend's mother. And then the last one was just at the end and felt unconnected. So I chose to focus in on just the man versus self conflict of, in war, should our soldier open himself up to making new friends, given that that might just make more pain as those friends die? Now I'm going to revise my anecdote, focusing just on that one single conflict. So my exposition is that my soldier arrives at training and it's the first time he's been separated from longtime friends. So that's setting up this idea that he's potentially lonely and he's kind of wishing he had more friends. So again, I have to lay out my conflict right at the beginning of my story. Now, I need to increase the tension around this question of should I make new friends or not, and why that might be hard. So every step along the way of my rising action needs to contribute to that same conflict. So, I still have the commanding officer, but this way, I have the commanding officer yells at him, and my soldier's reaction is that it's so much harder to cope when he doesn't have his close friends around. Again, reinforcing the conflict of he's lonely, he's looking for friends. Now he meets that new guy at the camp. He relates to this new guy because this guy also has a family and is lonely, and realizes he doesn't want to get too close to him because he's had so many friends die. Again, that develops my conflict of my soldier is looking for friends but is also afraid of making new friends. Now I need a climax where my soldier is going to have to make a decision around that one conflict. This is what I added to the story. This new guy is going to ask my soldier a personal question that would cause him to open up. And my soldier has to decide whether to open up to this guy or to avoid the question and therefore kind of shut down the relationship. My soldier's decision is going to be to open up to the new guy because he's going to realize however hard it is to lose a friend, It's even harder to feel alone in such stressful situations. And so he's going to decide to appreciate his friendships while he has them, even if it's not forever. That's my decision. That's my climax. Then I go into my falling action. What happens as a result of the decision that I've made in the climax? My soldier is going to write a letter to his old friend George with new confidence, because now he's appreciating his friendships in a new way. And then he hears that they're leaving for another round at the front, but again, coming back to this issue of making friendships and the role of friendship in the war, he's going to joke around with his new friend, and that makes the fear of going back to the front more bearable. So again, now this whole story deals with the conflict of, should I make a new friend or not? Even if that might cause me pain, develops that conflict, rises to a key climax where my soldier has to make a decision, and then resolves with him feeling more at ease with his approach to friendship. Based on this, you want to think about how to improve the rising action in your draft. Here's what I would suggest. I would start by mapping out your own plot on a plot chart, like what we've practiced, or have a friend map it out and see if he or she can pick out the events of your rising action and where your climax happens. Ask your friend if he or she can identify the most important conflict and where that conflict comes to a climax. If your soldier can't, you've got some revision work to do. Make sure that every event you write about in your story relates to that one conflict, and take out anything that doesn't. Gradually build the tension in the rising action through events that become increasingly difficult for your soldier to handle, much like what we talked about with the hero cycle, as the hero encounters more and more difficult challenges, or like what we talked about with the 3 little pigs, where we have 1 pig and then 2 pigs and then 3 pigs involved in stronger and stronger houses. So try to layer your rising action to make it more and more intense. And then make sure there is a decision that your soldier has to make at the climax, because that will naturally lead you to a resolution and falling action.